Hello. So I'm planning on talking a lot more about the economy in future videos. I just very briefly introduced it as part of my statement of values so far. But I think that we can all agree, just on the basis of fairness, if nothing else, that there is something very wrong with our system in that it is producing huge inequality. So what do I mean by that? I mean the bottom 50% of people in America right now share between $2 and $3 trillion of the wealth, whereas the top 50% shares around 150 trillion. So, and actually it's not by no means evenly distributed amongst the top 50% either. It's very much concentrated at the top. But we have enough just with the fact that the bottom 50% essentially have nothing. So let's go from there. And there are much better bases from which to criticize the economic system, and I will certainly do that in the future and suggest something better. But for now, let's just look at some fairly simple ways to deal with some of the inequality, to tackle it. Let's think, for instance, it would be quite reasonable to try to move, say, $50 trillion from the top 50% to the bottom 50%. That is not actually the solution to our problems, but it would certainly help. So let's have a look at how we could do that right away without any more thought. So one way that comes to mind was something that ex-President Trump's lawyer said as part of his defense in the fraud case in New York. And that was, he said that he was accused of the practice of inflating his wealth when he was trying to borrow money from banks, but deflating his wealth when he was reporting for taxes, right? So what his lawyers suggested as a defense was that everybody does this. All right, so let's believe them. So let's say everybody is doing this, all the corporations, all the people who live in that sort of realm. And so therefore, why don't we just simply go after everybody? And the reason is because it's not really a very difficult thing to do. These are totally document cases, right? So they can be investigated just by looking at documents, like, previous tax filings or applications for loans and so on. So then all the Attorney General of a state would have to do is, let's say, set up a scheme whereby corporations were first encouraged, requested to self-report. And if they self-reported, say within a year or so, then they would be excused, say 80%. I mean, not excused for 80%, but they would only have to pay 80% of what they owed. And so actually, if they believe that later on it will come out, it will be investigated or could be, then they would be motivated to take 80% as opposed to what could be a lot more. Well, what could be 20% more. Okay, so I think that I think in President Trump's case, that made $400 million. So that was just one company, one person, one company. So imagine, how much could be garnered in that way. All right. So that's one simple way. Let's just do it. Let's ask the attorney generals of each state to look into this at least. Another fairly simple way, which actually I think President Biden has looked at, would be to charge taxes on one's stocks, on the profits that you make in your stocks and your shares. So right now, until that money is realized, while it's still in the shares, then you don't have to pay any tax on it because it's not considered, actual money. It's just potential money. Okay, so fine. So then let's say, so the way that people get around this, if you're wealthy enough, is you can go to the bank, and if you want to spend, say, $90 million buying land and housing in Florida, you go to the bank and you say, can you give me a $90 million loan? And I'm going to hold my stocks and shares as collateral, right? So they don't have to realize it. And then the bank can give that person, that extremely wealthy person, a $90 million loan at a very low rate, right? So instead of paying like the top tax rate like we all pay, well, if we're in the top tax bracket, which most of us probably are not, then they would end up paying only, say, whatever the bank gave them, 1%, 2%, 5%, all of it would be a huge advantage to them. So then I would suggest that our government pass a law which stops the banks from doing that, which defines using your stocks and shares as collateral as realizing them, right? Therefore, they would have to pay regular income tax. Now, most of us think that if you have billions of dollars, then you should be paying really high interest, like 80% or something, way higher than the current tax rate. But let's say even at the highest current tax rate, which is 38%. So somebody who pulls out 90 million, then they would be paying tax on that. So in order to get 90 million, they would have to actually pull out a lot more than that. They would have to pull out a certain amount that would give you 90 million plus after you've paid taxes, the 38% taxes. So my guess is that would be about 160 million they'd have to pull out. I don't really do the math, but it will be a lot more, okay? So that way we could collect tax from these multi-billionaires every time they actually spent some money, instead of right now we can't tax them because it's not defined as realized income. Okay, so there's a couple of ways. One more, which I forget, but let me have a look. So right now, the top people in each company and the shareholders are paid a huge amount each year, way more than the total paid to the workers. So I just suggest, and that probably wouldn't be possible right now because I can't see Republicans agreeing to this, but I would suggest to tax a corporation if they pay more to the CEO than to the workers, like a certain amount more. So a factor of, say, 40 times as much as compared to, say, your lowest worker. That, and then anything you go above that, you would have to pay a large amount of tax on. Because right now, the CEOs can get paid a huge amount while they are paying their workers less than they need to live on, right? So I think it should be decided, what do people need to live on? And any corporation that is choosing to give that much profit away to pay their CEO or their shareholders and so on, rather than pay the workers, should have to be taxed on the amount of difference. All right, so fairly simple. Maybe none of these can come into effect at this point because, like Elon Musk, for instance, if you go back see, before the Trump tax cut, he didn't have all that much. I mean, he had like, that's a comparative statement, right? He had way less than 100 billion. I don't remember how much he had, maybe tens of billions. But now he started this year with like 250 billion. And he hasn't handled it all that well, maybe, so it's actually been going down this year. But if we allow for more tax cuts, which is what the Republican plan is, to cut taxes on the wealthy and then cut Social Security for the people who are already making practically nothing in comparison anyway, then if their plan would result in a greater inequality, not a better situation. Okay, just my idea. And I will definitely talk about the economy from a much higher perspective, because this is just still allowing the idea that the economy is the most important thing, which is not true. So we need to look at what is the purpose of an economy, okay? And we're going to do that in future videos. Thank you.